when a struggling single mother accepted a job cleaning Keanu Reeves's villa. She never imagined her secret life of homelessness would be uncovered. What started as a simple act of kindness from the Hollywood star soon turned into a life-changing journey of hope and redemption, proving that even in the darkest times, a single moment of compassion can light the way. Sophia stood in the crisp morning air, nervously clutching her neatly pressed uniform. It had taken everything she had to keep that uniform spotless, a fragile shield against the chaos of her life. Her car, parked in a secluded alley just a few blocks away, was stuffed with blankets, a cooler for meals she could barely afford, and the one toy her son Liam had begged her to keep, a reminder of the child she was fighting so hard to save. Her hands trembled slightly as she rang the doorbell of the grand villa. When the door opened, she was greeted not by the cold professionalism she expected but by a warm smile. Keanu Reeves himself stood there, dressed simply but exuding a kindness that instantly put her at ease. "You must be Sophia," he said, his voice as calm as a gentle breeze. She nodded, struggling to maintain composure. This wasn't just another cleaning job. It was a chance to scrape together the money for Liam's mounting medical bills. But as she followed Keanu inside, marveling at the understated elegance of his home, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully guarded secret, her homelessness, might not stay hidden for long. Before I dive into the incredible turn this story takes, let me take a moment to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from today? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever been in a situation where hope felt out of reach but you kept going anyway, hit that like button, because this story will show you just how powerful a small act of kindness can be. Back at the villa, Sophia got to work, determined to do everything perfectly. As she scrubbed and polished, she couldn't help but notice how differently Keanu treated his staff compared to other employers she'd had. He greeted everyone with genuine warmth, asking about their families and making sure they were comfortable. For Sophia, who was used to being invisible, it was almost overwhelming. But kindness, she knew, came with risks. What if he noticed her tattered shoes or the faint exhaustion that even makeup couldn't hide? What if someone asked too many questions? Sophia wasn't ready for pity, not when she had worked so hard to hold on to her pride. Little did she know, one small discovery by Keanu would change everything. As Sophia methodically worked her way through the expansive villa, she was careful to keep her head down and her movements precise. The house was a masterpiece of understated elegance, with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the rooms in natural light and minimalist decor that whispered luxury. But Sophia barely had time to take it all in. She was too focused on doing her job perfectly. Every swipe of the cloth, every sweep of the floor was an effort to prove herself worthy of this opportunity. Halfway through polishing a mirrored console table, she felt a presence behind her. Startled, Sophia turned quickly, almost knocking over a decorative vase. Standing there, with a mug of coffee in hand, was Keanu Reeves. He smiled warmly, his relaxed demeanor disarming her immediate panic. "Hey there," he said, his tone casual and kind. "You must be Sophia. The agency said you'd be helping out today." Sophia froze, caught off guard not just by his sudden appearance but by the way he spoke to her, as though she were an equal, not just another temp worker. She nodded quickly, clutching the cleaning cloth in her hand like a lifeline. "Yes, sir. That's me." "You can drop the sir," he said, chuckling softly. "Just Keanu is fine." She managed a small, nervous smile but didn't trust herself to say more. Keanu studied her for a moment, his gaze not in the least bit judgmental but curious, as though he were trying to understand her without asking too many questions. "Have you had a chance to grab a coffee or water?" he asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Feel free to take a break if you need one." Sophia shook her head quickly, almost reflexively. "No thank you. I'm fine," she replied, her voice a touch too firm. She wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. Keanu tilted his head slightly, as though sensing there was more to her story than she let on. "All right," he said after a pause, his smile never wavering. But don't hesitate to let me know if you need anything. Okay? Thank you, she murmured, grateful yet overwhelmed. As Keanu walked away, Sophia felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from something she couldn't quite place. There was no condescension in his words, no sense of superiority. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with genuine kindness that she barely knew how to react. For the rest of the morning, her mind replayed the encounter, her movements automatic as she cleaned, the way he'd smiled, the sincerity in his voice. It was a reminder of the kind of person she'd forgotten existed. Little did Sophia know, this would be the first of many moments that would forever change her life. Sophia worked tirelessly, her hands steady and her movements purposeful. But her mind wandered to the memories that clung to her like shadows. As she scrubbed the marble countertops in Keanu's expansive kitchen, she couldn't help but think about the stark contrast between the life she was trying to build and the one she had left behind. Just a year ago, her life had been different, stable. She had a modest apartment, a steady job as a receptionist, and a world that revolved around her son, Liam. His laughter had filled their home, a bright sound that made the small, worn-down space feel like a palace. But everything had unraveled so quickly, leaving her grasping at threads that seemed to slip through her fingers. The day of Liam's diagnosis played in her mind like a cruel replay. She remembered sitting in the sterile hospital room, clutching her son's tiny hand as the doctor explained that Liam had leukemia. Her heart had shattered at those words, but she had held herself together for Liam. "We'll fight this," she had whispered to him, forcing a smile through her tears. "We're a team, and we don't give up." But fighting came at a cost, financial, emotional, and physical. The medical bills piled up faster than she could manage. First, she sold her furniture, then her car, and finally, when there was nothing left, she lost her apartment. She had tried to shield Liam from the worst of it, pretending that their long drives to the hospital were an adventure and that the nights spent in shelters were part of a game. But the weight of it all had become too much to bear. As Sophia straightened the chairs in Keanu's dining room, her chest tightened at the memory of her final night in their apartment. She had tucked Liam into bed and promised him that everything would be okay, even though she had no idea how they would make it through the next month. That was the last time she felt like she had control over her life. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped the table, but she forced herself to focus on the present. There was no time for self-pity, only survival. This job, no matter how temporary, was a lifeline. She needed it to work, not just for herself, but for Liam. And yet, there was a small part of her that longed for more than survival. As she glanced around the villa, she felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy, it was hope. Hope that one day she could provide a safe and comfortable life for her son again. Hope that the kindness she had glimpsed in Keanu's eyes might not just be a fluke but a sign that there were still good people in the world. By the time Sophia reached the guest bedrooms, the exhaustion in her limbs began to catch up with her. She paused for a moment, leaning against the doorframe and letting her eyes drift to the window. Outside, the afternoon sun painted the garden in shades of gold, a picture of serenity that felt worlds away from her own reality. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, jolting her back to the present. She hesitated before pulling it out, her heart pounding as she saw the hospital's number on the screen. The familiar wave of fear washed over her as she answered, bracing for bad news. "Miss Sophia," the nurse's voice said gently. "We just wanted to update you. Liam's responding well to the latest treatment. He had a tough morning, but he's stable now." Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes as relief flooded through her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Please tell him I love him." "We will," the nurse replied warmly. "And remember, he's a fighter, just like his mom." Sophia hung up, her hands shaking as she wiped her tears with the edge of her sleeve. She wanted to believe the nurse's words, to hold on to the strength she so often pretended to have. But the reality of her situation weighed heavily on her shoulders. As she returned to her cleaning, she reminded herself why she was here, to keep going. For Liam, the thought of his bright smile and unyielding spirit gave her the strength to push through the exhaustion and doubt. Little did Sophia know, her quiet resilience hadn't gone unnoticed. Keanu, passing by on his way to the backyard, paused just out of view. He watched as Sophia straightened her posture and wiped her eyes, returning to her work with a quiet determination that stirred something deep within him. For now, Sophia had no idea that her life was about to take a turn she could never have anticipated. And Keanu, too, was about to realize that sometimes the smallest moments of kindness can lead to the biggest transformations. Sophia was nearly finished cleaning the expansive patio that overlooked a shimmering pool. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting golden light across the villa's manicured gardens. She moved methodically, sweeping away stray leaves and debris with practiced precision. This job, demanding as it was, gave her a rare sense of purpose, something she hadn't felt in a long time. As she worked her way toward the pool's edge, her broom caught on something shiny beneath the clear water. Pausing, she squinted against the sun's reflection. At first, she thought it was just a stray piece of jewelry, something left behind by a guest. But as she crouched down to get a better look, she realized it was a bracelet sleek and silver, with an engraving on the inside. Sophia hesitated, debating whether to leave it for someone else to find. But something about the bracelet compelled her. Setting her broom aside, she grabbed the long pool skimmer, carefully maneuvering the handle until the bracelet hooked onto the netting. As she lifted it from the water, droplets cascaded from its surface. Catching the light, she turned it over in her hand, her breath hitching as she read the engraving. To Keanu, love Mom. Her heart raced. It wasn't just any bracelet, it was Keanu's, a personal item that clearly carried deep sentimental value. Sophia's mind immediately raced with possibilities. What if it had been lost for years? What if returning it would earn her more trust? Perhaps even a longer-term position. But beneath all that was something simpler, the knowledge that she had the chance to do something right. Clutching the bracelet tightly, Sophia wiped her hands on her apron and straightened her uniform. She knew she couldn't just leave it somewhere. She had to give it to him directly. But the thought of approaching him, of speaking to him one-on-one, filled her with nervous energy. He had been nothing but kind to her so far. But what if she interrupted him at the wrong time? What if he thought she was overstepping? Taking a deep breath, Sophia made her way through the villa. Her footsteps echoed softly on the marble floors as she followed the sound of low voices toward the study. She hesitated at the doorway, her hand hovering just inches from the frame. Inside, Keanu sat at a desk, scrolling through papers while a staff member explained something about the evening's event. Steeling herself, Sophia cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves." Both men turned toward her, and for a moment, Sophia felt her courage waver. Keanu's expression softened when he recognized her. "Sophia," he said, his tone welcoming. "What's going on?" Her hand tightened around the bracelet as she stepped into the room. I found this by the pool," she stammered, holding the bracelet out toward him. "It looked important, so I thought I should give it to you." Keanu's eyes immediately locked onto the bracelet, and a look of astonishment crossed his face. He reached out to take it, his fingers brushing hers as he did. For a moment, he simply stared at the item in his hand, his expression unreadable. "This," he began, his voice quiet, "this belonged to my mom. I thought I'd lost it years ago." His eyes lifted to meet hers, filled with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "I can't believe you found it." Sophia managed a small smile, her nerves still buzzing. "I just thought, well, it seemed special." "It is," Keanu said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Thank you, Sophia. You have no idea how much this means to me." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of the moment hanging between them. Then, Keanu gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit for a second." Sophia hesitated but eventually obeyed. Perching awkwardly on the edge of the chair, Keanu leaned forward, studying her as though seeing her for the first time. "You've been working here for just a couple of days, right?" he asked. "Yes," Sophia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And you're already going above and beyond," he said, a faint smile curving his lips. "You didn't have to bring this to me yourself. But you did. That says a lot about your character." Sophia felt her cheeks flush under his kind words, unsure of how to respond. "I just wanted to do the right thing," she murmured. "Well," Keanu said, slipping the bracelet onto his wrist. "You did. And I won't forget it." As Sophia left the study, her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She didn't know it yet, but that small act of integrity had set in motion something far greater than she could have imagined. Sophia continued her tasks around the villa, her mind still reeling from the unexpected interaction with Keanu. His gratitude for something as simple as returning a bracelet had left her both humbled and astonished. She had expected a polite thank you, maybe even a quick nod of acknowledgement, but instead, she'd been met with genuine warmth and a level of kindness she wasn't used to. As the day wore on, Sophia's nerves began to settle. She focused on her duties, trying to shake off the lingering sense of vulnerability that came with being noticed. For months, she'd worked hard to stay invisible, to avoid drawing attention to her struggles. Yet now, for the first time, she wondered if her invisibility was more of a burden than a shield. That evening, as the staff prepared for an event at the villa, Sophia found herself in the kitchen, arranging trays of hors d'oeuvres. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted vegetables and freshly baked pastries. She worked methodically, her focus entirely on ensuring every tray was perfect. But even amidst the busyness, she couldn't ignore the quiet buzzing of her phone in her pocket. She hesitated before pulling it out, her heart sinking as she saw the hospital's number. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she stepped into the pantry for privacy and answered. "Hello, Miss Sophia. This is Nurse Bennett from the hospital." A warm yet serious voice replied. "I wanted to update you on Liam's condition. He's stable for now, but the latest tests show his white blood cell count isn't responding to the current treatment as we'd hoped." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It means we'll need to adjust his treatment plan," the nurse explained gently. "But that also means additional costs. I know this is a lot to process, and we're here to work with you on payment options." Sophia nodded, even though the nurse couldn't see her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, just take care of him." As she ended the call, Sophia leaned against the pantry wall, clutching her phone tightly. The weight of everything, Liam's illness, the mounting bills, the fear of losing him, pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. She fought to steady her breathing, wiping away the tears that had begun to fall. Unbeknownst to her, Keanu had been walking past the kitchen when he noticed her slip into the pantry. He hadn't meant to intrude, but the sound of her muffled sobs stopped him in his tracks. Concern etched across his face. He waited until the pantry door opened, revealing a pale and tear-streaked Sophia. "Sophia?" he asked gently, his voice filled with concern. "Is everything okay?" Startled, Sophia quickly wiped her face and forced a smile. "Oh, I'm fine, Mr. Reeves. Just a personal call. Nothing to worry about." But Keanu wasn't convinced. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. "You don't have to tell me if you're not comfortable," he said, his tone soft. "But if something's wrong, I'd like to help." Sophia hesitated, torn between her instinct to stay silent and the overwhelming need to share the burden she'd been carrying alone for so long. Finally, the walls she'd built around herself began to crack. "It's my son," she admitted, her voice barely audible. He's sick. He has leukemia, and the treatments are expensive. I've been doing everything I can to keep up, but it's never enough." Keanu's expression shifted to one of deep empathy. "How old is he?" he asked quietly. 6, Sophia replied, her voice breaking. He's only 6, and he's already been through so much. Keanu nodded, his gaze steady and kind. And you've been doing all this, working here, living out of your car, for him. Sophia froze, her breath hitching. How did you know? Keanu smiled faintly, though there was sadness in his eyes. I've been around enough people to recognize when someone's carrying more than they let on. I noticed your shoes, the way you hold yourself. And now I know why. He paused, his voice softening further. You're an incredible mother. Sophia. Sophia couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They spilled down her cheeks as she finally let herself be vulnerable. I'm just trying to keep him alive, she whispered. But every day feels like I'm failing. Keanu stepped closer, his presence calm and grounding. You're not failing, he said firmly. You're doing everything you can, and that's more than enough. Sophia looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, she admitted, her voice trembling. You don't have to do it alone anymore, Keanu said, his voice resolute. I want to help. Sophia stared at him, disbelief written across her face. You've already been so kind. I couldn't possibly. This isn't charity. Keanu interrupted gently. It's the right thing to do. I've been fortunate in my life. And if I can use that to make someone else's journey a little easier, I will. Sophia's lips trembled as she tried to find the words. I don't know how to thank you. Keanu smiled warmly. You don't have to. Just focus on Liam. He's the real hero here. In that moment, Sophia felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. And for the first time, she realized that accepting help didn't make her weak. It made her human.